Welcome to the Apex Energy Podcast. I'm your host, Al-Qattan. Today, my guest is Adnan Al-Abbar. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Do you mind just giving a brief introduction about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I don't mind. I'm a theoretical physicist from Kuwait, and I'm interested in poetry and in economics as well.
Okay, what kind of theoretical physics?
Currently, I'm working on optical physics, quantum optics, and also on general relativity.
Okay, how did this journey start with your interest in physics? It seems like this is a big part of your story.
There's a funny story about the inception of my interest in physics. I was an accounting student. I wanted to transfer to engineering, computer engineering in particular. And I took Physics 101, and the professor explained, he was talking about circles. So he drew a straight line and said that the arc of a straight line, a straight line is an arc of a circle whose radius is infinite. I knew just at that moment that I had to go to physics.
Wow. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And why quantum physics and general relativity specifically? Is that what eventually happens when you go down the rabbit hole? Or?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So most physicists either go to either work on statistical mechanics, which means, for example, studying thermodynamics, or condensed matter, or quantum mechanics, and they all rely on quantum mechanics.
Okay.
Nuclear physics, particle physics, and so on, they all rely on quantum mechanics. And some go to astrophysics, which relies on general relativity. Some physicists still do the work of mechanical engineers.
Yes.
And even chemists and chemical physics and so on. So most physicists go to either quantum mechanics or general relativity. Some do both. Actually, many do both.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
Do those two? I've heard these two theories maybe contradict each other, or they haven't bridged the gap between general relativity and quantum mechanics. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So we can simplify it by saying that quantum mechanics looks at gravity as a force that is transmitted between particles, and general relativity looks at gravity as a distortion of the shape of space. So one simple realization of this is to imagine light. When you shine a laser, light travels in straight lines. Mm-hmm. But if the space is curved, the straight line will be curved with the space. It will fall onto the space. So light will be deflected.
Yes.
Even though it's still traveling in straight lines, because the space itself is curved.
Okay. And how does the space get curved? Is it through a gravitational pull or by mass?
Yeah. So in general relativity, we stop saying gravitational pull.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's pushing force? Is that more correct? Or like, what is gravity? How does... I called it a pushing force. I've heard that people say it's a pushing force because Newton said it was a pulling force, and then Einstein said it was a pushing force. I don't know how correct that is, though. So I'm just kind of asking about, like, what is gravity? What is, I guess, what's your understanding of gravity, do you think?
Yeah.
Is?
So
it's hard. It's hard to put it. Yeah.
It's very hard to define gravity. Imagine having a planet. In the Newtonian conception, space is absolute.
Yes.
So any two observers can agree on any point in space. If you have an event happening at any point in space and time, two observers can say that A happened before B, event B, or event B happened before event A. But special relativity does not allow you to say A happened before B or B happened before A.
Okay. And that's the difference between special and general.
Yeah, general relativity focuses on gravity much more than on space and mass and energy and so on.
Gotcha. Okay. So how does this conflict? You might have answered this already.
Yeah.
But with quantum mechanics.
Yeah. So for example, if you have, so what's the electromagnetic force? You have two electrons.
Yeah.
And the two electrons have the same charge.
Mm-hmm.
So they repel each other.
Yes.
How physicists explain this is to imagine an electromagnetic field,
mm-hmm.
and the electromagnetic field tells each particle how it should behave. Okay. Should it be attracted or repelled at any moment? Where should it be guided?
Yeah.
What should it be its direction, at what acceleration, and so on. So someone who's studying classical physics would look at these electromagnetic fields.
Mm-hmm.
He would look at the electric field and know what the direction of the electron should be and what force is acting on it. A quantum physicist or a quantum field theorist, for example, looks at the electric field as a field, meaning a field is something that gives particular measurements at each point in space and at time. So what they would imagine is that if you have an increasing electromagnetic field, if you have a photon, for example, it transmits the force. These photons are virtual, which means you can't measure them.
That's where it enters the theoretical kind of territory.
But they're not theoretical in the sense that we might imagine ordinary language. They're not theoretical as in they don't exist or we can't know them. If you look at, for example, the Higgs boson, it's a theoretical particle, but it exists as a virtual particle. We cannot detect it by itself, but we can detect its decay. So when we hypothesize the particle, we can imagine what it would decay into, and we can measure those fragments and know that there was really a Higgs boson here.
Very interesting. I've read a little bit about the Higgs boson. Where does it exist? What's a quick explanation, if you can? I mean, it's okay, but
sure.
Is it in the quantum realm? How much microscopically do you have to go in order to, I guess, measure the radiation of that, or not the radiation?
The
decay. Sorry.
So there's two things to see here. There's something called the Higgs field. It is a field that extends through all space, and the excitations of this field are the Higgs particles. So the Higgs field metaphorically gives mass to the particles. The Higgs field is what makes massive particles move at speeds less than the speed of light.
Okay. Yeah, I see.
That's a very simple explanation.
Very interesting. Okay. Very cool. And what would you say is your most passionate part in physics?
I'm really passionate about lasers. And quantum optical effects.
Okay. Is it because of the effect you explained earlier, where when space-time bends or space bends, it also bends?
Not particularly.
Light? Okay.
But this is a useful application to these things, and I'm very interested in them. I'm interested in lasers because, I look at lasers. When you survey a museum, when you go to a museum, you see so many paintings. You see each painting adopting a new style. Some trying to be creative, the artists themselves, and so on. So there are so many lasers, each using different kinds of physics, each operating on different. Each lasing means emitting light at different frequencies and so on. And each laser uses a different kind of physics to emit light. And it's so interesting, the variety you have in lasers. That's the most thing I'm interested in.
How does it have different physics?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So let's look at the simplest laser, the helium neon laser. So a laser is a structure of 4 things. You have a gain medium, meaning you have matter that takes energy and emits light.
Okay.
And then you have coupling mirrors, meaning mirrors at the end of the laser that trap the light inside,
Okay.
and only allow a small fragment out, which you see as the laser light.
Okay.
And then
a
there's
reflection. So,
Yeah.
Off of a mirror. Okay.
yeah. So you have a medium,
Yes.
and then you have mirrors that reflect light back and forth.
Okay.
And one of the mirrors is 100% reflecting.
Okay.
The other is reflecting at around 99-98%.
Okay.
So the 2% of energy you see is the laser light that you see. And then there's something called the pump, which provides energy to the laser. And finally, there's the geometrical structure, which we call the resonance cavity, that allows light to go back and forth. So there are 4 components. The helium neon laser is as simple as I just explained. Now, if you look at, for example, the X-ray laser or the synchrotron laser, it is a particle accelerator where you accelerate electrons, and these electrons emit the X-rays.
Okay.
It's a completely different, it operates on completely different physics. So these are just 2 examples. Some lasers use, for example, heat vapors.
Yes.
And these vapors emit light upon recombination.
Yeah.
There are so many varieties.
Amazing. Who's your favorite physicist?
My favorite physicist is...
If there's one.
He's Professor Peter Milonni.
Okay.
Yeah, he specializes in quantum optics and quantum electrodynamics. And I'm a really big fan of his. I read all of his textbooks. He talks about some specialized topics of light, like the Casimir effect.
Yes.
Or the different measurements of the speed of light and so on.
Okay.
It's very interesting.
What's the Casimir effect?
Yeah.
You sent me something. One of the video. I didn't watch it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I will. Yeah, but yeah.
So the Casimir effect is an effect where, if you have, for example, a sheet, 2 sheets of metal or 2 sheets of conductor in a vacuum, you can notice that they are attracted to each other. The Casimir effect is an effect relating to the lowest energy of a quantum system.
Okay.
Yeah, we call it the quantum vacuum, which is the book I sent you.
Yes. Okay. Nice. In this quantum vacuum, so again, I'm just trying to this is for my own knowledge, physics. We can take Newtonian physics, which is just atoms, essentially, right? Electrons with a nucleus inside, right? And then you go on a deeper level. You increase the microscope, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then you enter the quantum realm,
Yeah.
which is full of quantum quarks, right? And quantum fields.
Yeah.
And those fields get condensed into particles eventually, and that's what...
Yeah.
Is that correct in saying that?
Yeah. Quantum field theory looks at particles a bit differently from some classical quantum physicists.
Okay.
So particles are excitations of the fields. So, for example, if you have an electric field,
Yes.
any excitation of the field, that is where you detect an increased energy in that field, is where you find a photon.
Okay.
There's a famous physicist and someone who's worked extensively on quantum optics called Roy Glauber. He says, for example, a photon is where you find the photon. So what does that mean?
Yeah.
It means if you have a for example, if you measure the electric field at if you measure the electric field at any point, you'd have a detector there. But the electric field, you'd understand that it extends over space and not just at that point. But if you detect the electric field there means that the photon is there.
I see. Okay, so I wanted to ask, do the laws, the mathematical laws of electromagnetism with normal like Newtonian physics, right? Like charges and the distance, I don't know what the equation was, like Q equals something over distance squared. The laws of electromagnetism in general, do they apply on the quantum level, or is it just like a whole other landscape where it kind of diffuses that mathematical law, so to speak?
That's a very interesting question. In the earlier days of quantum mechanics, we still worked on classical electromagnetism. For example, if you look at Hendrik Lorentz, he's a physicist who worked on the electron theory. He worked on electrons and the electromagnetic field as if they're completely classical.
Interesting.
But as we discovered the quantum effects of electrons and the electromagnetic field, we realized that we had to make electrons quantum. What does quantum here mean? So the word quantum does not mean one particular thing, it means many things. For example, the electron cannot have any energy it wants. It cannot have any, the energy of the electron cannot vary continuously.
It has to be
at intervals of, for example, E, E1, E2, E3, and E4.
Quanta.
Yeah, quanta, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why we call it quantum mechanics.
Okay.
For example, if you look at the atom, the electrons in the atom cannot have any energy. They have to have certain energies, and we can discover these energies by the spectra, by the light they emit when we heat the atom. The electrons jump from one level to another. That was the major discovery of Niels Bohr, and he modeled the atom around this concept.
Yes.
But as we advance, we started with the classical electron and the electric field, but then we quantized the electron. Then we quantize the electric field itself. So there are certain equations and relations that we use in quantum mechanics, one of which is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, for example, which tells you that once you have a more or less determined value for the position of the electron, you cannot know so much about the momentum, direction, and speed of the electron.
And vice versa, right?
And vice versa, yes.
Yeah.
So the same can be done with electric and magnetic fields themselves. Yeah. If you treat electric and magnetic fields as classical, we call it semi-classical physics.
Okay.
So it's not completely classical; it's almost classical. But if you treat the electric fields themselves as quantum, as quantized, this is quantum electrodynamics.
Okay. How does quantum coherence, the idea of quantum coherence, are you familiar with the concept?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Or quantum coupling, is that not the same thing, or?
No, they're different topics, but they are both studied by quantum optics.
Okay.
So let's look at something first called coherence. What statisticians and physicists call coherence is, there are two kinds of coherence. There is spatial coherence and there is temporal coherence. If you look at one point in space at different times, this is spatial coherence. If you look at two points, this is temporal coherence. If you look at 2 points in space at one point in time, this is temporal coherence. So what do we try to see? We try to see how the electric fields change with respect to each other. If I jump whenever you jump, or if I jump whenever you land, and vice versa, this means that this system is coherent.
Yes.
But if it's random, it's incoherent.
There's a relationship between the two. Yeah.
So
this stuff is fascinating, and it sounds super complicated, but it's like the underlying layer of reality as we know it. how do you think we like make meaning out of all of this? Because I feel like there's a lot of groups of people that have taken, since quantum mechanics and quantum theory have come in to the sphere of influence and culture, like materialists use it as an explanation that, at the very bottom of matter and reality itself, it's just like, energy and all this stuff. There's no spirit, there's no vital spirit that's kind of like pervading the universe or whatever it is. But other people, I don't know if you've heard of this New Age movement, they kind of they take the quantum stuff and use it as evidence for, consciousness, a higher divine spirit, so on and so forth. They talk about energy a lot, you know what I'm saying? So
this might be called consciousness of the gaps.
Consciousness in the gaps. So instead of God in the gaps, it's consciousness in the gaps. So what's your opinion on, I guess, this New Age movement? Let's start with that. And making meaning out of, this stuff.
I think it's scientifically impermissible to make these jumps. We should take the position of ignorance.
Yes.
We still, when I say we, I don't mean myself. We still don't understand consciousness very well, meaning we can understand many aspects of consciousness, but some very troubling problems still persist. So why should we jump to quantum mechanics when we still don't have a quantum formulation of consciousness? So it's scientifically impermissible simply because we cannot make that bridge. If we can make that bridge, it's possible to say so. I personally don't think consciousness has anything to do with quantum mechanics in a direct manner. And it's premature to say that. I hear that a lot, especially from, for example, readers of Deepak Chopra.
Yes.
By the way, we see this also with WhatsApp messages. For example, when you receive a message that tells you that there's a verse in the Quran that says that talks about black holes or dark energy or dark matter. I don't think it's permissible to explain science in that way.
اشمعنى؟
So, for example, when they say when they tell you that الطارق is the quasar.
إنزين.
والسماء والطارق والنجم الثاقب. They tell you that the الطارق is a quasar. How do you make that jump? It's
صعبة شوي.
It's very elusive, and it's you have to stretch and twist the words just to interpret it that way, and it would defy all classical interpretations. It's far-fetched.
It's you're fitting a square into a.
And moreover, the verse does not talk much about black holes or quasars or astrophysics. So what exactly do these verses mean to achieve if they wanted to do such a thing?
عدل كلامك صراحة. I've talked to Dr. Rana Dajjani. She's a biologist, PhD, who talks about this specifically in relation to evolution. We won't talk about that, but we'll relate it to physics in the sense of religion, the Quran specifically in this context. Should be two different fields. We don't need to necessarily bridge the gaps. Why are we looking in the Quran for proof, like they're desperate for proof, as if they don't have the underlying belief themselves? It's like they need it as confirmation. But why do you need it? It's the holy book. You shouldn't believe it on its own. So that's very interesting. And it's not the purpose of it.
Definitely.
يعني كتاب روحاني المفروض يفسر لك فيزياء. وثاني شيء, with scientific theories, they change. Like, okay, you can talk about dark matter, mention the Quran, but dark matter is a mysterious force. It can change in 10-20 years. The scientific interpretation can change. So what, then the Quran is wrong? That It's not.
My argument is that even if it doesn't change, why should the Quran do that?
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. That's super interesting. So what do you think consciousness, is? If you have an answer, like what is it? Something?
I have no idea.
You have no idea. Okay, gotcha. Okay, very interesting. Yeah, the Deepak Chopra stuff you've talked about is super interesting. I've been very skeptical of Deepak Chopra. I like the spiritual stuff, some of the people, but I don't know. Like, he is a medical doctor.
Yeah.
And anything now with quantum on the label, I'm just become a little bit skeptical of.
Yeah.
It's like, do you really understand quantum mechanics or quantum physics and all this stuff? And I just see it as like, it's an underlying layer of reality. It's affected the culture, and they're trying to make meaning out of it.
Yeah.
So, and maybe there is no meaning at that level.
Let me put this point. Quantum mechanics is a language we study the world in.
Yes.
So we study the world using quantum mechanics, but quantum mechanics is not reality. Meaning that this is only the quantum mechanics contains instructions on how to treat particles, the interactions between particles, electric fields, and so on. But quantum mechanics by itself does not say much about everything. It's just a formalism.
Gotcha. So let's dive a little bit into maybe some philosophy. Who are some of your favorite? So you're interested in philosophy as well, right?
Definitely, yeah.
Who are some of your? What's your most favorite area in philosophy or philosopher?
Yeah. I'm interested in political philosophy and philosophy of mind and epistemology.
Yes.
And my favorite bit is moral philosophy and ethics.
Okay. Epistemology, are you familiar with Karl Popper?
Definitely.
Okay.
I think every scientist should.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so you talk about ethics, right?
Yeah.
What do you mean specifically? Like, give me an example of...
So, the terms ethical and moral are usually interchangeable.
Yes. Actually, what is the difference?
Yeah.
I interchange them.
Yeah.
I don't really understand the distinction.
I've read many papers on the distinctions between ethics and moral philosophy, and frankly, the distinctions are not very... the attempts at showing a distinction are not very convincing. So, the way I conceive of moral philosophy, it's the study of human happiness. What we mean by human happiness is not pleasure or joy, but a state of being in general that we reflect upon society, wherein we show people that we are worthy of emulation. So look at, for example, the idea of the good life in Aristotle. Aristotle has 3 books on ethics. We still don't know if the Magna Moralia, which is the 3rd book, is a book written by Aristotle. But he has the Eudemian and the Nicomachean ethics. The Nicomachean ethics focuses more on the intellectual life, whereas the Eudemian ethics is a all-around holistic view of moral life. These books are called ethics, but they are books mostly concerned with moral philosophy. They try to study human happiness and how to reach it. So how does Aristotle define happiness? When you go to the supermarket and buy oranges, you have a reason for doing so. The buying of the orange, for example, is an end.
Okay.
But going to the supermarket is a means. You go to the supermarket in order to buy an orange.
Okay, is it similar to cause and effect?
Yeah, means and ends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So once you get the orange, you realize that even the orange, which is an end, is a means for a greater end.
And ad infinitum.
Yeah. So Aristotle says this cannot go for infinity. There has to be an ultimate end.
Okay.
That every action seeks to approach.
Interesting.
This ultimate end is one important idea. The other important idea is the perfect end. An end which can never be better. You can never do anything that makes that end better.
Okay.
So it's a perfect end. Aristotle defines happiness as the ultimate perfect end we live for.
Yes. Was Aristotle, is this in line with the concept of the logos, the pervading kind of like unity within the world?
No, that's closer to Plato and to Plotinus.
Okay. Okay. And then, yeah.
Aristotle is a scientist. He's a biologist. He's
Yes.
a zoologist. He's a physicist.
Yes.
He invented many of the natural sciences.
Yes.
Zoology, biology, physics.
It's amazing.
Yeah, natural history and so on. So he conceived of the universe as something that's a bit materialistic.
Okay.
Whereas Plato, for example, looked at the world in a more metaphysical sense.
Yeah.
He believed that this reality is just a reflection of some images, some ideas.
He was an idealist.
Yeah,
we could say maybe.
He was strangely enough he was a realist. We call Plato's theory realism.
Interesting.
He believes that the real world are those forms. This is there is a distinction between the universe and the world.
Yes.
What we call the universe is the collection of matter, energy, and human beings, materials, and so on. But the world is the collection of the universe and abstract objects. An abstract object, for example, is a number. You cannot find numbers in the avenues, for example. You will not stumble upon a set.
Yes.
When you go to the supermarket. These are abstract ideas. They do not exist in space and time. So the collection of abstract and concrete objects are the world. Plato believed that the real that these abstract objects, which he calls ideas or forms, are the real meat and potato of the world.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This sounds a lot like potential energy in physics. Is there any relation, do you think, there? I don't know, like the idea of potential energy. I don't know if there's a connection, but it just reminds me of it.
Yeah, well,
Maybe
the idea of potential, the idea of potentiality really flowered in the thought of Aristotle. He distinguished between actualities and potentialities, and he incorporated that into his metaphysics. And one could say that the idea of potential energy and kinetic energy, we mean actual energy, motion, and so on.
Yeah.
Potential energy is still actual energy, but I mean energy existing in motion.
Yeah.
One can say that these were flowered out of Aristotle's philosophy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and the Platonic forms, I've been doing some research lately on morphogenesis and biology and how the embryo shapes itself and turns into the organism that we are today, the complex organism. And it just doesn't seem like a materialist explanation is satisfactory in terms of genes, that there's some kind of form that exists in which the material fills out almost. Yeah. And a lot of biologists have thought and brought in the Platonic forms and said, this is a potential, something's going on here. Some say it's bioelectricity, some say it's like some type of magnetic force, morphic resonance, that's Sheldrake, I'm a big fan of.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, okay, this is very interesting stuff. So I want to go back to the moral thing. You said with moral philosophy, and you were talking about a means and an end, right? And this was Aristotle, right?
Yeah.
And Aristotle says...
these are actually the first two paragraphs of the Nicomachean Ethics.
Okay.
They're really interesting.
Okay.
There's a paper by a philosopher of mind named Anthony Kenny, who studies are there more than one perfect ultimate end, which we call happiness?
Yes.
So, for example, can two actions lead to two happinesses, or there is one happiness that we all, for example, try to approach?
So happiness is essentially where there's no means and you reach a full end.
Yeah.
The ultimate end.
Yeah.
It sounds very similar to like the concept of enlightenment in Eastern philosophy, where you stop chasing after things, there's no desire, and you are still and you are full, so to speak, or you're satisfied, and you reach this state of bliss, I guess, and happiness, or whatever you want to call it.
Maybe that is so, but upon reading Aristotle, you would see that there are important differences. That's perhaps closer to Plato's conception of happiness than Aristotle, but it's not surprising that you say so, because Plato studied Eastern thoughts. He traveled all around the world. He went to Egypt and India and so many other areas.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, so what is the distinction between morals and ethics, do you think?
So moral philosophy is something that's deeply internal. It's introspective. It looks inside.
Yes.
Whereas ethics deals with how we deal with each other, how we interact with each other.
Gotcha.
It's much more social than you cannot commit unethical acts against yourself, for example, but you can commit immoral acts by. You might say that they are linked, and they really are linked, because you cannot be happy, for example, if you harm others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You cannot be happy if others do not appreciate you. You cannot be happy if you don't have friends.
Yes.
Aristotle extended this idea further. He said you cannot be happy if you don't have slaves, for example. But these ideas are outdated now. We can try to abstract a little from Aristotle's conception, and I really recommend Anthony Kenny's paper Happiness that delves much deeper into this concept. Anthony Kenny also has another book on Aristotle's idea of happiness. It's called Aristotle on the Perfect Life. It's a fantastic book, trying to study the intricacies of the terms used by Aristotle, especially regarding the ultimate ends, regarding perfect ends, and then trying to compare between the Nicomachean and the Eudemian ethics and so on.
Interesting. Okay, so I see a lot of influence of Greek, some Roman, right, philosophers. Is that mostly it? Are there any other generation in which influences you, perhaps maybe Islamic?
Sadly, no. I've read nothing about Islamic philosophy.
Wow, interesting. And I want to get your opinion on that a little bit too. Like, some people think, I've spoken to people, there's a skew in our education where it's like, oh, we learn about, the white male philosophy or history or economics, whatever, and the other stuff is usually like ignored. It's like Eurocentric, our education system. What do you think about that?
I don't mind if science or philosophy was quote unquote Eurocentric. So for example, when we seek the truth, we shouldn't ask who discovered that. If it's a true claim, it doesn't matter who said it.
Yes.
It's not. I think it's strange to call it Eurocentric just because people from Europe discovered that this is a joint heritage of the world. It doesn't belong to anyone. If Europeans were the first to discover so much of the science we know now and the philosophy we know now, someone from Eastern Asia or Africa or South America can equally as well use these tools to study these things, and perhaps even go to farther lengths than what someone from Europe
Yes.
or Northern America did. It's not something that's strictly European. I like to think of it as objective sciences that don't care who discovered them and who...
Gotcha. It's just facts about reality. It doesn't
Yes.
matter
Yes.
the person behind them, what race or skin color.
And frankly, I think that there is some... This is some controversial. I think there's some malice in these ideas, and there might
Racism?
be some... Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me that it's so interested in race in ways that reignite all the evils of racism. The best way to deal with this issue is to ignore it. We shouldn't care who discovered what, and we should only look at the consequences. We should look at the theory. We should look at the factual truth of the claims,
Yes.
and so on. That's it.
Yeah, you strike me as a person who's very logical and tries to be objective. And these kinds of things, the cultural things or racism or the malice that you spoke about, are emotional. They come from an instinctual part of our brains, which are by definition irrational, not logical.
Yes.
So you're someone, it seems, that you very clearly make a distinction between those two. And one should be dealt with separately, and the other should be dealt with separately, right?
I think that these things will ultimately destroy the sciences as we know them.
Okay. Do you think that's like the power in science, where it's separating objectivity from subjectivity? That's where the power lies?
And that's what philosophy is for, by the way.
What?
Philosophy is for finding objective truths about the world. It's about asking questions. It's about considering the ways we answer them. We shouldn't be biased. We shouldn't even look at, try to be, we shouldn't give importance to who said such things.
Okay. Very interesting. So yeah, that's stuff I wanted to really bring up, was this like tension between the objectivity, subjectivity, and people making, bringing their emotions into things. I will say this one last thing, and then we can move on. But I feel like it's easy for, again, the European race to be hated on because of things like colonialism or the Age of Discovery, right? And I feel like there's this narrative that tends to be put out, especially within universities now. I went to university from 2017 to 2021, and a lot of it was this kind of like postmodernist narrative or whatever you want to call it. Not feminist, but like progressive, let's say, narratives of demonizing white European male. It's a whole thing. It's very controversial.
I try to accept everyone. I really hate that language.
Yeah.
And no one can deny that colonialism is evil.
Yes.
But we shouldn't counter evil with evil.
Yeah. Because then you're just repeating the cycle.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's dive in a little bit into, I want to ask you about economics, right? Where does this interest in economics come from? We'll start there.
I think every physicist has some maybe simple interest in, not every physicist, many physicists. And we hijacked the field. The first two Nobel laureates in economics were physicists.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why is that, you think? What?
Economics is the most mathematical branch of the social sciences.
Yes.
And physicists and mathematicians
they dig into it.
Naturally attracted to that. Yeah.
Okay. Why is it even considered a social science if it's mostly mathematical? Because it deals with, people, businesses, companies. These things fluctuate. Yeah. They're unpredictable. I don't know.
Let me tell you, as I did, why I started to like physics. My friend gave me a book that's called Homer Economics. Homer Economicus. in the first chapters, they defined the science.
Zain.
When I read that definition, I fell in love with the science itself without knowing much about it.
Okay.
So they defined. There are many definitions of economics, but this definition is by Lionel Robbins. They defined economics as the science of human choices and their consequences.
On a grand scale?
Yes.
Does it have to be on an individualistic scale, or can it be on?
Can be on any scale.
Interesting. How do we map that on then? What do you mean by the consequences, like mistakes with money? Because it has to be with money, right?
So there's one important qualification. Economics is the study of human choices and their consequences. But humans make choices using scarce resources.
Okay.
And these scarce resources have other uses.
Okay.
So there's competition in the definition, and there's scarcity in the definition.
So there's emotion.
Yeah.
Subjectivity.
Rationality and subjectivity, subjective preference, valuation, and so on.
Okay.
So it can apply to everything. You said money. Economists care superficially about money. Money is just the Homo sapien way to choose.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
If
If you consider money as, let's look at a barter system. A barter system is as economic as any other money system.
Yeah.
So why do we use money? We use money to avoid a problem called the double coincidence of wants. Suppose I can give you a physics lesson, and you can, for example, provide me with pure carbon or pure nitrogen.
Okay.
But you don't want a physics lesson. You want, for example, gold. And I want pure nitrogen. We cannot have the trade. We have to find another person who's interested in what I'm willing to provide and what you're willing to give.
Yeah.
So we can make the three-part transaction. Money is one method to eliminate the third party, to make me exchange with you without any third party.
It's like a middleman.
Yeah. So you realize money is just something that facilitates this interchange. It's not as important as the interchange itself.
Okay. And that's where the behavior and the consequences come in, because it's essentially trade.
Yes.
Between two people.
Yes.
Full of subjectivity, full of irrationality.
Yes.
It's not actually about the money. It's just a middleman. Okay.
Yes.
Very interesting. What is your favorite? I don't know, favorite, but what's the economic model that you find most feasible? Because I've read a lot about neoliberalism in the West and the rise of neoliberalism and how different that is from liberalism itself. What do you think about, like, let's say, for example, the West kind of conception, or the way they've been running their economies? So neoliberalism, from what I know, it's mostly laissez-faire capitalism, right? They make it free, but there's only certain kind of interventions. So it's not complete laissez-faire.
So there's a big problem with the term liberal itself. What does liberal mean? Someone who's concerned with liberty, someone who's interested in liberty. But try to think about it this way. Who we call liberal in the United Kingdom is different from who we call liberal in the United States. We call conservatives liberals in the United Kingdom, but we call, for example, Democrats
liberals
and liberals in the United States, because slowly the term was appropriated by, for example, Democrats in the United States to. They wanted to see themselves as someone as those who liberate us from want. Whereas liberalism in the classical sense is not about that. It's about avoiding human tyranny, avoiding totalitarian states, giving people their freedoms. and freedom from aggression only. Freedom from aggression only, not freedom from want.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a difference. Neoliberalism as a term is very vague. It means so many different things to so many different people.
Yeah.
It's a catch-all term that's mostly used derogatorily.
Okay.
So I never use neoliberal or neoconservative. When I use it on the rare chance, I understand fully how vague and unmeaningful it is. So when we talk about classical liberalism, it's a school of philosophy that adopts capitalism in a limited sense. They are monarchists, meaning that they believe in the utility and the necessity of the state, but to a much lower degree. As opposed to, for example, libertarians on the one hand who think that, or anarchist libertarians who, for example, think that the state is a violent organization that shouldn't exist. Some people really believe that.
Yeah, I know them.
Yeah, and I'm one of those people.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know two then.
Yeah. and on the other hand, some people believe that there should be a state that has so many regulating functions that protects individuals, regulates externalities, try to find solutions to climate change, provide internal and external security, and so on.
So it's like a mixed thing.
Yeah.
Why do you think? So you just confessed. You came out. You said, "I'm an anarchist, libertarian." Right. So you don't think there should be any centralized government dictating the economy, or in any form. There should be no power with them. At all.
At all.
Why is that?
Because I'm against any form of coercion. Whenever you have a state, you have coercion. States can. It's very hard. I don't have any problem with the states by consent, but it's very hard to have states by consent, and that's why I'm against them.
Because it's forced. That's what you're trying to say.
But in another sense, I'm with Hans Hermann Hoppe. I'm much more eager to support monarchies over democracies.
Why?
Yeah.
This is out there. Yeah, this is interesting.
There's a very interesting book by Hans Hermann Hoppe. He's an Austrian economist. He's a German Austrian economist, meaning he belongs to the Austrian School of Economics, but he's actually German. The book's called Democracy, the God That Failed. It talks about the differences between democracies and monarchies. He doesn't support either. He himself doesn't support either, but he thinks that monarchies are better than democracies. Why? Because the monarch owns the land. He owns the resources. So he tries to make sure that they are not wasted, that they are sustainable. Whereas in a democracy, when someone gets into office, he knows that he has this power, he has these powers and these liberties for such a limited time. So he will try as much as possible to extract all of them in the moment he has the powers to.
But it's a catch-22. You don't elect a monarch; they by default have to be passed down through some.
Definitely, there are many problems with both systems. There is a problem with every system.
There's no perfect system.
There's no even anarcho-capitalism, which we talked about. It's not a perfect system. And we don't generally try to find the best thing. We try to find the fourth or fifth or sixth best thing, because we know that there is no perfection in this world. We only try to approximate ideals. And not reach them.
So, the critique of democracy, and I think Socrates, I've seen on some title where he didn't like democracy. I didn't understand why, because democracy is hailed as like the apex of human organization, especially in the West.
But democracy killed Socrates in the end. Democracy generally results in democratic despotism, meaning that what the majority wants will be despotic to the minorities. For example, there are many laws in every country in the world. I'm not talking about Kuwait, I'm talking about every country in the world. There are many laws, legislations that coerce people into many actions or aggress upon them. These are not voluntary things. And I don't mean murder laws. Murder laws are... murder is inherently a crime.
Ethically and morally.
But there are things which aren't crimes that are being fought against.
Do you think dictatorships are inherently bad?
Yes.
Why? Why is that?
Because a dictator in the end will supersede the wills of the people. We want a general air of liberty. And that's the ultimate end of liberalism or classical liberalism. It wants a system that's conservative and liberal in the sense that people have freedoms, people have liberties. No one can aggress upon another and get away with it. And when they say no one, they really mean no one. There is no exception for any person.
Even the philosopher king?
Even the philosopher king, even the police, even the judge, any person. They don't make allowances for any person.
Very interesting. So let's contrast that. And again, you said you prefer... did you say that? You prefer a monarchy over a democracy?
But I prefer a...
Kuwaiti, صح?
No, I'm not talking about Kuwait. But I prefer an anarchist society over... And anarchism seems to have a very sour taste. When we hear anarchy...
It sounds evil.
There's a book by Robert Nozick called Anarchy, State and Utopia. Anarchy is translated into fawda, chaos. Robert Nozick didn't mean chaos when he said anarchy. He said that even if there were no rules superimposed on us, I wouldn't aggress upon you and you wouldn't aggress upon me. There is no overarching government above, for example, Kuwait and Qatar, or Iran and Brazil. But that doesn't prevent them from cooperating. Why is that the case? Because they don't need someone who coerces them into being cooperative. That's the general idea of anarchy.
So like laissez-faire? Capitalism, to its extreme?
To its extreme,
What would you say against some of the... go ahead. You're gonna say something?
It's strange to say that, but to its extreme. And I don't think it's an extremist position. I'm an extremist towards, for example, objective truth. But this extremism is not... I don't consider it to be over the board. There are some extremisms that are repulsive, for example, but I think one should be extreme about ethical conduct, moral conduct, and objective reality and so on.
So by definition, isn't it a presumption that if you are for laissez-faire capitalism or anarchist libertarianism, right?
Anarcho-capitalism.
Anarchic capitalism. You're presuming that economies are natural phenomena, right? Because because some people think of economies as a man-made construct that needs top-down control. So, is that correct in saying that?
Definitely.
Yeah. How is it natural?
Economy is a general name we give to the interactions between individuals, and mostly to the voluntary interactions between individuals.
Okay.
So it's completely natural. There are many economies in the animal kingdom. They're much less developed than here. There's very little specialization in chimpanzees, for example.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much more specialization in human beings.
Yes.
There are roles for chimpanzee civilizations and ant civilizations.
Yes.
And this can be considered an economy. Our economy is voluntary.
Okay.
And there's division of labor. And these are characteristics that define us. We don't have to force ourselves to interact with each other. We do that so naturally. An economy is the most natural thing in the world. It's not man-made.
Really?
Yeah.
Isn't a landscape of, again, with going back to biology, of cooperation, competition between organisms? I mean, you can do this on a microscopic level.
An economy is just a name for human cooperation.
Okay. But what if you extrapolate that further? It could be, because organisms, again, cooperate as well and choose that, and it does seem to kind of have that air of like, there's no rules, there's no top-down control. It's a free-for-all, but from within that, there comes order. And I mean, one of the biggest results is human beings, right? It's like kind of arise out of nature. So there is a kind of order within the chaos, so to speak. It's not chaotic in the full definition of the word, where everything is random. There's this order that emerges from the bottom up. I guess. Does that?
Yeah.
Same thing with natural economies. Yeah.
We have to try to use quantified language.
Okay.
Yeah. So, how ordered are humans? We have to have criteria. We have to have measurements of the degree of orderedness.
Okay.
And degree of order in human beings.
Okay.
Some individuals hyper specialize in topics. For example, some people, for example, physicians only study skeletons or focus specifically on some segment of the human body. You cannot find that in any other creature on Earth. They don't specialize as much as we do. So this method of quantifying our specialization is very important for an economy. So an economy is measured by these things, and we have to use these quantified words.
Okay. Okay. Is there a system that exists that it's anarcho-capitalistic? Or what's the closest one, if not?
I was reading a paper yesterday about Ireland between 600 to 1600 AD.
Okay.
It was very close to an anarcho-capitalist system. America, the United States of America before the Second World War.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Some periods of the United Kingdom, Hong Kong, Singapore, none of which were in anarcho-capitalism. But we try to look at specific parts of such an economy, specific parts of such a political system, and try to extract from these. You never see anything pure in the universe, and you never see pure manifestations of anything in the universe. So you try to look at several different specimens and focus on focus on some characterization, some qualities in these specimens. And the same thing we do with states, the same thing we do with societies, with countries, and so on. We try to look at different areas, different particular segments of that economy, some industries, some time periods, and we try to see how much they approach that ideal.
Okay. Do you think there's a relationship between, because you essentially just said that nothing occurs in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Right? And to continue with that idea further, would you say that the economic paradigm of a time is closely associated, let's say, with like the political stuff that's going on, the subjective stuff, the cultural stuff, advances? Because I've heard this a lot where, again, within the West, there's been this domination, or they call it the age of ignorance, an age of exploration, and with it comes this chase for objectivity in a way where I don't think any other culture has taken it to that extent, perhaps. And that's translated into these economic paradigms because it's all about individualism, and individualism is its own philosophy. So are these all things interrelated? Do you see them? Is that a question? I don't know.
So classical liberalism is subscribed to individualism.
Okay.
It's subscribed to that spirit of liberty, the rule of law,
yes,
and so many things. So they come in the package. But I don't see the world today as closer to classical liberalism. In many areas, it's closer to, for example, socialism, or what we might say interventionism.
Yes.
A mixed economy, a mixed society. We have some freedoms, but there is much control, social and governmental control, all over the world. Even the United States, which we call capitalism, is so far from the ideal that it's regrettably still called capitalism. Hong Kong, Sweden is much more free. They have it's much more capitalistic than the United States.
Hong Kong or Sweden?
Hong Kong and Sweden, for example. Yeah. So we have to make a distinction between two terms. Capitalism means two things. It means a free exchange market economy, on the one hand, a system where people are free to enter and exit out of the economy, and their interactions are voluntary. Okay. That's one thing. Another term for capitalism means using capital resources to generate wealth. So the United States is the most capitalist country in the world in the second term, but not on the first.
Interesting.
Term.
Interesting. That's a very interesting distinction, and thank you for doing that.
Most you would be surprised that many political philosophers, political theorists don't understand that distinction very well.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's crazy how words are so easy to group and ungroup and misunderstand with.
Yeah.
Do you think we're inching closer towards a grand totalitarian state? Do you think a lot of people claim that our freedoms are being taken away globally, but I mean specifically you could talk about the US and all this stuff. Do you think this government control is increasing and could potentially, again, this is all speculative, but where do you see the trend going?
There are pockets of liberty, and there are pockets of increased interventionism. So it's very hard to say something about the whole world.
Yes.
But I think that the world is becoming more totalitarian today than it was yesterday and the day before and the day before.
Okay. As an anarcho-capitalist, do you see the importance in a decentralized currency like cryptocurrency?
Definitely.
Okay. Or gold? That's usually the two paths that people take.
I'm 100% with gold and with Bitcoin.
Okay.
I have invested a lot in gold. Sadly, not in Bitcoin.
Okay.
But inshallah soon.
Inshallah.
I'm for a 100% gold coin.
Both?
Yeah,
gold?
I'm against fiat currency completely.
Completely?
Completely.
Because it can be printed by a centralized power? Or
not only so, because at some point you're forced to have some money in fiat currency to pay, for example, taxes and so on. And I think that this is illegitimate. It's being hyperinflated.
Yes.
In many parts of the world, and inflation robs people of their savings.
Yes.
This is theft.
Wow.
Pure and simple. Yeah, this is theft, pure
Really?
and simple. There is no other way around it. Because a central agency is creating more money and they force you to use their money, their fiat currencies.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Okay. And so you like Bitcoin, cryptocurrency in general.
Yeah.
It overrides this problem.
Maybe not all cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
But
the trusted ones, or I don't even know what that means, the trusted ones. Yeah.
Bitcoin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. In an anarcho-capitalist system, there's no taxes, right?
Zero taxes.
Zero tax.
Yeah. Let me say it this way. Can we call a tax that's? Can we call something that's voluntary a tax? No. It's a price for a merchandise.
Okay.
It's a price for a service, so it's not a tax. A tax has to be coercive. So there aren't taxes because each tax consists in a threat of violence if you don't pay your taxes.
Wow.
Yeah, because you can't just not pay your taxes and...
it has to come with a threat.
Yeah, it has to come with a threat and imprisonment or even death.
But how could a society... How could we have fire departments? How could we have... ambulances? Does it have to all be privatized? What if, I mean, I don't know. What if it just seems very scary.
So there's a very interesting book by Murray Rothbard called For a New Liberty that discusses all these issues. It shows you that there are many private courts around the world.
Okay.
There are security systems. There's a book by Hans Hermann Hoppe called The Private Production of Security. So these things have been worked out by many economists and political philosophers. I mean, they've done their work.
Okay.
I've read them, and they provide very good arguments for these things. Usually something is done better when it's done by competing people instead of by someone who you're not allowed to compete with.
Okay.
So if no one is allowed to compete with Nintendo in production of video games, for example, the video game industry would be very boring.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe it will be good, but it won't be as good as when very, very tough competition exists.
Like monopolies.
Yeah. Not monopolies per se. Even we have a theory about monopoly. We think that monopoly is by necessity, almost by necessity, created by governments, and not by the free market enterprise. So when there's protection of one industry, when the government protects one industry, and some particular firms, you have a monopoly or oligopoly. But as soon as there is free competition, free entry, and free exit out of that industry, it's very hard to remain monopolistic because many other industries will try to come here when the rates of return increase for your industry. So, for example, if there's a boom in the movie industry, some producers of, say, paintings or any other industry, video game industry, they would try to get into the movie industry. Unless they are protected by the government, they will enter and they will...
wow.
Yeah. The profits will be equilibrated.
Where can I look more into this? This sounds interesting.
There are two very interesting textbooks on Austrian economics called Human Action by Ludwig von Mises and Man, Economy and State by Marianne Rothbard. They talk about all these things. They're very interesting textbooks. Many textbooks employ some concepts in Austrian economics and libertarianism. Here, I've recently read Samuelson and Nordhaus textbook economics. It's probably the most sold textbook of all time.
Really?
Yeah.
What is it called?
Economics by Samuelson and Nordhaus.
Economics by Samuelson and Nordhaus.
I'll send you the book afterwards.
Okay. Awesome.
So they all understand that these functions can be to a lesser degree implemented by market economies. What Austrian economics or libertarians claim is that they can be completely run by private enterprise.
I see.
Even private courts, police systems, and so on.
Okay. Very interesting. Adnan, I want to leave you with one last question.
Yeah.
This is amazing. I've learned so much, and
you.
I will learn as I re-listen. Do you think free will exists?
Yes.
Okay.
But I believe so based on faith. I cannot prove it.
Wow.
There's an argument, there's a quantum mechanical argument called the free will.
Doesn't Freeman Dyson push that a little bit? I've heard some of his stuff he talks about.
I don't know. In the text, I studied quantum mechanics from a textbook by Giorgio Parisi. He recently won the Nobel Prize in Physics. And they talk about this in the first chapter. It's very interesting. There's also there's a mathematician who talked about this, the free will theorem or something like that. I don't. It's on the back of my mind.
It's not new agey stuff.
No. It's a mathematical theorem, and it's based on quantum mechanics and classical mechanics and chaos theory and so on. It's totally scientific, but it's not actually. Maybe it's not a theorem. Maybe it's a conjecture.
Okay, like a hypothesis. Or
yeah, but even so, they prove it from a philosophical point of view. Anthony Kenny, the philosopher I talked a lot about today, he talks about free will. Free will is one half of freedom, which is called the liberty of indifference. There's the liberty of spontaneity and liberty of indifference. Liberty of spontaneity means you have more than one choice to choose between, and liberty of indifference means you have free will. Okay. So I accept both, but I take it on faith. I can't prove it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Adnan. Is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with at all? Any piece of advice? Anything on your mind? Or
just if you're interested in what I'm saying, just read the books I've mentioned today, and I hope you like them and learn from them. Try to write down the terms and ideas so you can use them in your daily life.
I'll put the books, I can't say all of them, but I'll put some of the books in the link to the description.
Inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.